It's time for another episode of Love, Marriage, and Fantasy. I am Star Claiborne.
And I am Anton Leonard Claiborne, and we are your global relationship strategists.
We live our marriage on the guided principle no one or no thing.
So, take some time, listen as we make sense of all of this.
Okay, in today's episode, we are going to discuss not listening when your spouse is talking, struggling with revealing something you are not ready to reveal, people who try to avoid confrontational conversations, and why you should not have an important conversation when angry.
Do you think changing subjects in the middle of a conversation, that's a thing that you struggle with?
You know that's the thing that I struggle with.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to just, I didn't want to sound like I was accusing you.
You're only accusing me of something that is absolutely true. Yes, I struggle with that tremendously.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessarily that I don't want to have the conversation. My mind tends to go into different places
during the conversation.
Yes, so I feel like I have to hurry up and say it before I forget. But I have been trying to consciously, over the years, although I still have not found the success, I've been trying to consciously complete the full thought before I move on. So I don't really have a true answer as to why that happens, except that I know when I'm talking to you about one thing or talking to somebody about one thing, I tend to push over to something else. Like my mind immediately another topic will be triggered by something that I say, or let's just say we're working on something and I'm talking to you about something else. It could trigger something that we were working on that I need to start acting on at that point or that I forgot to do. So then I'm like, oh, well, don't forget to remind me to do this or something like that. So, see, it sounds crazy even trying to explain it.
Well, it just listening to you trying to explain it. It reminds me of when we were talking about in one of the other podcasts how people tend to think about what they want to say while someone's talking to them. So that causes them to not really hear what that person is saying.
Because they're listening to respond.
They're listening to respond.
Listening to understand.
Right. Instead of listening to understand. But can we say that that's the same thing? Because you're listening to what your spouse is saying. But then another thought comes into your mind. And granted, it could be an important reminder that you just, recalled. But is it necessary for you to say it at that moment? Because in doing so, saying it at that moment, your spouse could think that you're not listening to what I'm saying.
Wait, okay, I think I'm confused. I think I might be a little bit confused here because are you referring to...
Are you confused because there's
no.
another subject coming up in your mind?
No. Are we talking about when I'm communicating with you and I switch my own subject 3 or 4 times? Or are you referring to when we're having a conversation and you're talking and then I just have to interrupt?
Both. Because what we're talking about, why do women change the subject in the middle of a conversation?
Okay, so I think I was misunderstanding you because changing the subject in the middle of a conversation when we're communicating, that doesn't happen. Changing my own subject when I change the subject as I'm communicating, that happens.
So you're saying that you change the subject when you're communicating because something just might come up into your mind.
Yes.
But when you and I are communicating, you
yes,
don't.
when you're talking to me about something, I am attentively
paying attention.
attentively
you are
listening to you.
Uh-huh.
And I do not change the subject.
Right.
But I think from the beginning of this conversation, you're now accusing me of saying that I do change the subject.
No, I asked you. Is this something that you struggle with?
I struggle with it on my side. I struggle with it on my side, meaning, and you've known this to happen several times before. I may come home and start talking to you about something dealing with the kids, and then in the middle of that, a thought will come into my mind about something with the podcast, and then in the middle of that, something might come into my mind about dinner, and so I've had 3 conversations in less than 3 minutes. But that's all me talking.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're speaking to me and we're having a discussion, that does not happen. We are very focused on our discussion. Now, on the outside looking in at other relationships, if there's a two-way discussion, because in the first scenario I was just referring to, that's a one-way thing because I'm the only one talking. You're listening and I just happen to change my own subject.
Okay. I can recall that happening
multiple times,
often,
very often. But when we're communicating, that doesn't happen that I'm aware of.
It happens more frequently when you're right. No, I agree. It happens less often when you and I are communicating.
Right. But I think one of the reasons for women doing that is maybe they're just trying to avoid something that may come up that maybe they didn't reveal before. Maybe they're afraid of something that's going to be said or something that's going to be revealed in the midst of the discussion that they're not ready for. Potentially,
so
that could
they're
be
struggling with revealing something that they're not ready to reveal.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people just and it's not just women, men do it too, but I think just in general the human is not they're not ready. They're not ready for what's going to be revealed when they start asking questions and bringing up certain things. Like when you're ready to take something on, when you're ready to have a discussion, you got to be ready for whatever is going to come out of that discussion. And whether you like it or not, you have to be ready for it. And so, a lot of times I think people try to steer away from the negative impact of what's going to happen. And they try to steer it in a direction that's only going to work for them.
Now, I can agree with that because I have been in conversations where I didn't know, but I sensed that this person was trying to avoid talking about what had just come up in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah. You do kind of feel like, wait a minute, they're intentionally changing this. If you're the listener, right. You feel like they're intentionally changing the subject
because they're not ready. They think they're ready, and women, because we're so emotional, how wonderful. We were just made to be so emotional. But women will, I've seen it happen where a woman will come at a man all angry and just on 100 times 10. And then when things start being revealed, they're not ready. So they try to steer it in a different direction and try to take it in a whole nother direction than what the original conversation was supposed to be about.
Or redirect it back on him.
Yeah, because they're not ready. But like I said, not saying that this is all about women because men do it too. I've had it happen to me on many, many occasions because men are not ready for the response that they're going to get either. If you are dating a woman who is real and dating a woman who is going to tell you what is on their mind, they're not ready. They're not ready for the real response either. Even though a lot of men try to be hard. So you have the emotional woman and you have this man that tries to be so hard, but everybody's emotions are still fighting against each other in the middle of the whole conversation.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And then, of course, it leads to, I mean, that could be the reason why, people not being ready. That could be the reason why a normal conversation, where they're just talking in general, small talk, can lead to a serious conversation because a person who's not ready to handle serious issues is confronted. Then all of a sudden, the person they're talking to realizes, hey, he or she is struggling with answering that question. What's going on with that? And so now they're more on the, defense because they're trying to avoid, they're obviously avoiding that topic.
Right.
So now it turns into a serious conversation. And, I've seen that happen at parties. That was the last thing that came to my mind. Like, I saw that happening at a party where, this guy and this girl, they was just kind of talking or whatever. Both of them was a little tipsy. And it was obvious that he was trying to avoid what she was talking to him about. Well, they was talking amongst everybody there. But then he tried to quickly change the subject, and she noticed it, and she made it serious. She's like, oh, hell no, hold on, wait a minute. It turned into one of those. Yeah, you gonna answer that question. It was like that. But is that a educational thing? Like,
but then what men do, a lot of men
go ahead.
Well, like you just said, she's like, hold up, why are you not answering this question?
Right.
And he's trying to shy away from the question, but what he's also doing is he's avoiding confrontation. So a lot of times men,
that would be avoiding confrontation.
So I think women, it's more emotional. We're trying to avoid the whole, I guess, emotional side of it. We're not trying to get emotional. We already kind of have an idea of what's going to be said in the midst of this, but not ready. Men, on the other hand, are trying to avoid the confrontation. They're like, I ain't dealing with this right now, right? Like, I'm not even.
But in avoiding the conversation, does that mean that they're not ready to deal with those, serious, in-depth conversations?
They probably don't know how to handle it.
Probably.
They probably have no idea how to handle the conversation. They try to
quickly change the subject.
Mm-hmm. They probably don't even know how to handle it. But definitely avoiding confrontation is a key thing here too, because, you think about it, if you're in this state of calmness and all of a sudden you have that, okay, we need to have a conversation, and you're in the middle of a discussion and, you're going into it calmly, and then all of a sudden it starts turning in the midst of it, then, that person could be trying, instead of just saying, okay, right now, give me a moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
They tend to become defensive, and it's them trying to avoid having their calm state being taken away from them. So I've known that to happen as well. Instead of just saying, give me a moment. But a lot of times when you say, give me a moment, there's still that negative energy that comes about because your partner is not willing to give you that moment.
Yeah, that could happen.
Which is a big problem because it then becomes all about you, which is not good because
Right.
Your partner is having this state of calmness, everything, they're thinking everything is good. Whether they know or they think, they're just having they're in a state of calmness right now. And then you come in and you're like, all right, let's talk. It gets a little heated and they're like, okay, wait, hold on. I'm not ready for this right now. It's not necessarily them trying to avoid. It could be, but it's not necessarily them trying to avoid. It could be them trying to come up with another answer to what they know you're already about to bring up. I don't know.
It could be, but
a lot of times, it could be the fact that they're just in that state of calmness and you just broke it, and now they need time to get themselves together to get ready for this conversation because they know it's going to be a serious conversation.
Right.
And
because
you,
I
out of
do that
respect as
myself.
their partner, should be able to give them that time. Does it always feel good? No, because you're ready to get it off of your mind, but you need to be respectful and give them that time to get themselves together mentally as well.
True. You should. But, people tend to feel like, okay, because, we're in this relationship together, I should be able to come to you with anything at any time. And that statement, of course it's true, but there has to be, some more added to that statement for clarification, because I'm just gonna go a little left with this, but no one likes to be disturbed when they're on the toilet,
Right.
So for you to come, go to your spouse, you're banging on the bathroom door saying, I need to talk to you. Like, really? Is that, and it may be something serious, but is that, does that rule still apply? You should be ready to talk to your spouse about anything,
right.
Ready and willing,
right.
No. Does it still
apply
then? No. Of course it doesn't, but that's one of those moments when you would want to give your spouse some time to get ready for this conversation that you so are so eager to have.
Right.
But like I was saying, sometimes I'll say, okay, well, hold on a second before we get started. Let me finish doing what I'm doing if I might be working on a book or whatever. But for the most part, I think that comes with being able to say, hold on a moment, let me gather my thoughts before we start this conversation. That comes with personal development. That's not something that most people are taught when they're young by their parents.
Right.
To be able to act, to be able to tell someone, give me a moment, and then I will, have this conversation with you.
Right, and I'm going to say this because most women will probably say, wait, give you a moment so you can finish writing your book? Like, so your book is more important than this conversation that we're going to have?
Absolutely not. But the thing is, when you're a creative person, I know, but I know, I'm sorry I cut you off. I did. But a lot of people, they have a creative partner, and that's the one thing they don't take the time out to understand about their creative partner is that completing the thought is very important. That's why I'm going to let you get back to saying what you were trying to say.
It's okay. You just finished it. The point I was going to make was it does not mean that what they're doing is more important. It's just that they're trying to be in a productive zone. And especially you got to think about what is it that they're doing. You can't just you can do whatever you want. Let me not say you can't. You do whatever you want to do.
Right.
But whatever you do, you have to understand that there are consequences, reactions, all that good stuff that comes along with it. But to hear someone say they have to finish something before they start talking to you, you have to be respectful enough to understand that what they're doing, it's important. It may not be as important as the conversation, but you can't stop them, as he was saying, in mid-thought or in the middle of doing something and not expect for your mate to go into the conversation feeling some kind of way because their thought process was somewhere else when you came and interrupted it.
Absolutely.
And
now, of course, this is this does not include an emergency situation.
Right.
But even then, you should state that it's an emergency.
It's an emergency because
or that this is important.
Right. Their mind, and if it's going to lead to an argument, it's not important. Just saying. If you're coming, let me say this. If you're coming in already on fire and mad and angry because of something you just found out right then and there, if it is not about life or death, anybody getting hurt in the middle of the situation, it is not an emergency. You're just mad.
Right.
Please recognize that. You're just mad and you're going to make it worse because you're trying to talk while you're mad. Not a good idea. So, but you want to give them that respect that they're working on something and it's okay. They need a moment to get to a stopping point, and you have to know your partner to know if they're that type of person. I like to get to a stopping point before I move on to something else. I don't like to just jump. Now, back to the beginning of the conversation, I don't know why that works well with tasks and not conversations, because when I'm having a conversation, I can go to 3 different things in like less than 3 minutes. But the point is, you have to understand the personality of the person who you are with, and you have to be respectful of that time that they need to get their thoughts together. Are they always deflecting? Are they always trying to run away from it? No, not necessarily. But I think some of it could be that they are trying to push away the conversation. They're trying to avoid the conversation, and some of it is they just need a moment to gather their thoughts. But you have to be able to discern which one it is.
Well, that having that discernment is kind of difficult when most of the time, if a person is switching subjects in the middle of a conversation, they are not calm. You think about it, most of the time they're not calm if they're switching subjects in the middle of a conversation. So now we have to address this issue. When you are having a conversation and you're angry, is that beneficial? Or should you wait and calm your ass down?
You should, but let me say this as well when we get back to the discernment. The discernment will come with you understanding your partner, because excuse me, it's going to also be about you being able to pay attention to trends. So if you've been dating this person for a while and you notice that anytime something comes up that's really important to talk about, and that person kind of pushes away from that or changes the subject, the question you have to ask yourself is, okay, I see they're changing the subject, but I'm going to not ask yourself, but you say to yourself, I'm going to give them a moment and see if they are going to come back around to this conversation. Right? Because if I'm trying to talk to you and you're deflecting away from the conversation for whatever reason, maybe you're not ready right now, or you're trying to avoid something that you know may be a big blow up. Either way, the question is it important to you that you're going to eventually bring it back up and say, hey, I know you were trying to have this conversation, let's go. Right?
If it's important to you,
you
should bring it back up.
But that's what I'm saying when you talk about discernment. It's going to come in time, and it's not going to take a whole lot of time. If you're dating somebody for 5-6 months and you're starting to have conversations and you notice that person is consistently changing conversations on certain topics, then you're going to be able to understand that person, that this is what they do. Do you like it? Find out why. Talk to them. Ask them, okay, look, I noticed that when we get to these certain conversations, this is what happens. Let's talk about that for a minute. And then, are they going to switch the subject again at that point? Right?
Right.
But it's about paying attention to the trends, because I do believe that when you get ready to have a conversation with someone you've been dating, that a lot of times the discernment is already there. We ignore it.
I agree.
We ignore it.
I agree. We ignore it.
And we give it chance after chance after chance after chance, and find ourselves being hurt at the end of the day for something that we allowed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, are they deflecting? Are they just needing a moment? If they're just needing a moment, they'll say it. But at the same time, you can't
Most of the time they'll say it.
Yeah, you can't expect to come in mad and angry and expect that person to just come to you and be like, okay, what is it? And just not say anything.
Right.
Right? Like you have to
you need to try to calm down.
You should never walk into a
conversation. To have a serious
angry.
conversation.
Yeah.
You need to calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down. Well, at least do your best to try to pause and calm and gather your thoughts. Because I know that if it's something serious, it's going to take the average person a while to calm down. But if you at least try to gather your thoughts so you won't sound like you're rambling through your words, I think that alone will give the person you're trying to talk to enough time to adjust their thoughts to what you're trying to say.
Yes. Oh, and something else just came to my mind. So in the beginning of this episode, the initial thought process was me continuously changing my own subject.
Okay.
Versus me changing the subject when you're talking.
Right.
Okay. But then we found out it was me changing the subject when you were talking. And that apparently I do that from time to time.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we're sitting here, another reason that could be because I'm thinking back to times when I may have changed the conversation or tried to change the topic. It could be because we're just repeating ourselves.
And then you realize you're repeating
yourself. We're just repeating ourselves
during the conversation.
And over. Because I'm big on repeating myself. I like to talk. So if I notice that you're repeating yourself, I may change the conversation then because I'm like, okay, you just did that and said that and said that. So right. Sometimes it could be when you're in the middle of a conversation, it could be that things are being repeated and there's a conclusion already there.
Right. But even with that, and both of us,
unspoken conclusion as well that needs
to
be spoken. It could be an unspoken conclusion that needs to be spoken and clarified.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. That once one of the people in the conversation becomes aware that hey, we're repeating ourselves, somebody should speak up and say, hey, okay, well, I understand what you're saying,
And I get that a lot.
We can move on to the next subject.
I think I get that more than you get it. I get you saying to me, you get it, because I tend to repeat myself a lot.
Yeah. But the point is that somebody
very, very clear.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with making sure that you're understood, that the person you're talking to completely understands what you're saying. There's nothing wrong with that. But when that person is trying to tell you, okay, I got it, I understand what you're saying, you have to be open to the fact that they just interrupted you, but they didn't do it, to be disrespectful. They interrupted you to let you know, I understand what you're saying. Let's move on.
Okay, so to talk about that, I understand what you're saying. Let's move on. Yes, as you said,
they're going to interrupt you.
Well, yes, it's going to be an interruption, but I think that's a very valid point because there has been a few times that you've made that comment, and I'm like, okay, that's what? Like, that's it? Even though that's not a bad way to end it, but sometimes it could be the way, the tone that you use when you say it, right? Not that you're yelling, not that you're not yelling or raising your voice. It's just because sometimes when that interruption comes to the conversation, it can be abrupt, and the person who's saying it doesn't realize that they're saying it in an abrupt manner.
Yeah, that's true sometimes.
And
however, you do have to keep this in mind. Usually when a person understands, they will say, okay, or I got it. But if you're the person is talking, if you don't hear that because you're talking, right? You're trying to make your point. The next time they try to tell you, I understand it's going to be a little harsh.
I agree, and I was
because
about to
they're
say
trying to.
that because we are emotional, sometimes we miss certain cues in the midst of the conversation that could have ended it a long time ago, and the clarity could have already been there. And I am aware of that because it has happened to us.
Yes,
so that's what I was getting at. So it's not always, you have to know and understand that when that is being said, sometimes it's not to be mean or disrespectful or any of that, but it's letting you know that that clarity has already been reached. And so I think I tend to end it sometimes by saying, okay, so just to clarify.
Yes, you do.
But it still brings clarity to the table.
It does.
Right?
So I think the most valuable thing that we've gotten from this is we should try to at least gather our thoughts before we try to have a serious conversation.
Absolutely.
If we can't calm down completely, let's at least try to gather our thoughts before we try to have an important conversation. Because those few minutes it takes a person who's initiating this, or trying to initiate the conversation, those few minutes it takes them to calm down or gather their thoughts, it gives the other person, the listener, time to get ready for this conversation.
Agreed. Absolutely.
All right. So, we hope y'all got something from this podcast episode. Again, I just lost my train of thought. I did not just intentionally change the subject. Okay, so again, you can find the podcast on SoundCloud, and we're reaching out to other podcast platforms so that you all have access to the Love, Marriage, Fantasy podcast. Sorry, you have anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. You can follow us on Instagram at Love, Marriage, Fantasy.
And you can find us on the internet at lovemarriagefantasy.com. All of that. Awesome stuff. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll talk to y'all next time. That wraps it up for another episode of Love, Marriage, and Fantasy.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Claiborne Coaching. Download the podcast, Love, Marriage, and Fantasy, and look us up on Facebook at Claiborne Coaching.
All right, so we'll see you next time.